Ani Adonai Rofecha. I am your God who heals you. Iyar, the month of Taurus. Iyar is like an acronym for Ani Hashem Rofecha. And the letter of this month is Vav. And Vav means and. It's a joining letter. And we've got Nissan, where we have the Exodus being taken out of Egypt. And then we've got Sivan, which is next month. We're going to have mass revelation of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And we've got this month, Iyar, which is the Vav, the and, the joining of those 2 months. The full month is counting of the Omer. We count the Omer from Pesach, from the second day of Pesach, to Matan Torah, the receiving of the Torah. And every day we commanded to just count another day. So today is the 35th day of the Omer when I'm making this video. We celebrated Lag BaOmer, which is the Yotzat of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, who is the attributed author of the Zohar, which is one of the fundamental Kabbalistic texts. And so we celebrate with bonfires and being in the forest, and well, hopefully in the forest with the bonfire, and telling stories and singing. And also in the middle of the month we had Pesach Sheni, and that's when some people couldn't make it, like back in the day they couldn't make it on the actual day of Pesach to bring the offering in the temple, so they had another opportunity. And so it's really symbolic of having second chances and it never being too late. The verse in the Torah of Ani Hashem Rofecha comes after the Jews have been taken out of Egypt with all these miracles and wonders. They're taken out, they even cross the sea, and they make it to the other side, and they have their first crisis. Their first crisis is, where are we going to have water? We don't have any water to drink. So they go to Moshe and they're like, where's the water? And then they drink the water, and the water tastes like really bitter to them, and so they come and complain, and they're like, we can't drink this water, it's too bitter. So Moshe calls out to Hashem and he's like, oh, please, can you help? What do we do? And so Hashem points him to this piece of wood, like this tree, and he puts it into the water, and the water turns sweet, and then the Jews are able to drink the water. One of the times where it's pretty explicit, herbalism is pretty explicit in the Torah. And I'm so curious what that piece of wood is, especially now that I am really interested in foraging and herbalism. And it's really interesting that also all of my tinctures are ready this month, and I've been squeezing them out and putting them into tincture bottles, and it really feels like the right timing in this month of healing. So the sense for this month is hilhul, which can be translated as reflection, contemplation, meditation. And so it's like we're taking this medicine, this herbal serum remedy from Hashem, from the source, from God, and we're just allowing that to do what it needs to do in our body to help us readjust, and then allowing that reflection to come, allowing that healing. Issachar is the tribe of the month, and it's interesting because his birth is also tied in with another story where we've got some herbalism mixed in. It's the story when Reuven is walking in the field and he comes across some mandrakes, and he brings them to Leah, and then Rachel sees this and she goes up to Leah and says, can I have some of your mandrakes? Because Rachel at that point still had not given birth herself, and these duadim, I think, the mandrakes are used for fertility. So she comes up to Leah and says, can I have some of your mandrakes? And Leah's like, why would I give you those? Because basically you stole my husband. And this is a pretty significant point in the story with Leah and Rachel, because the whole story is like, Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel. Leah is then swapped in, and he marries Leah instead of Rachel, unbeknownst to him. He wakes up in the morning and he's like, I didn't choose to marry you, but now he's got this wife. And then he takes Rachel also. So now there's 2 sisters who are in relationship with Yaakov, married to him. But Yaakov really wants to be with Rachel. but Rachel is barren and she hasn't had any children. And Leah is very fertile and she has lots of children. And so Leah's having lots of children. Eventually, Rachel gives her maid servant Bilhah to Jacob, and they have children. And then Leah gives Zilpah, her maidservant, to Jacob, who also has children with her, and still Rachel has not had children herself, biologically. But after this episode, when Reuben finds these mandrakes, and Rachel asks Leah if she can have some of them, there's this meeting point where there's some kind of deep reconciliation or understanding of each other's side of the story. Like the way that Leah responds in that situation of like, you basically stole my husband, it's like, that's not what happened. Like Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel was supposed to marry him, and actually Leah was just swapped in. So if anything, Leah was the one who stole her husband, you know. But when Leah says this, it's like this place of the two of them recognizing that they both feel the exact same way. And so all of that bitterness and that resentment and that like yucky family dynamic thing, there's this recognition in each other of like, wow, we both have the same experience. And there's a deep peacemaking that happens then, because they make this exchange where Leah does give her the duadim, the mandrakes, and there's an exchange where then Leah goes to sleep with Jacob that night, because Jacob usually slept in Rachel's household or Rachel's room, but that night she goes up to Jacob and says like, tonight you're sleeping with me. And from that night Issachar comes, and they say Issachar is yesh sachar, and they talk about like Rachel, like yesh sachar lepulatech, that there is reward for what Rachel did originally in the first night, because they say like there's midrash that says like, how did Jacob not know that it was Leah? Like, how did he not know? And they talk about that they had special signs to indicate that it was Rachel, and Rachel gave those signs to her sister Leah, so that when she went to marry him and she did those signs, Jacob knew that it was her, even though it was actually Leah. So this deep, deep healing, sisterhood of the woman, of family dynamics that happens, and Issachar is the result of that. He's born as a result of that. The organ of the month is the right kidney, and we know that the kidneys are responsible physiologically for they're part of the system that are responsible for our fight, flight, and freeze, sending, releasing cortisol and adrenaline and those kind of hormones. And those are really helpful when there's an actual threat on the outside. But we know that with the effects of trauma, then we can often be stuck in those kind of states, even though the outside is safe. So I'm wondering about this deeper healing, this plant medicine, and being able to connect with our senses to the outside world, to give that feedback with that reflection, that hirhul, to say like, oh, I'm safe now. Just a quick note about the Omer. Basically, we know that there are 7 days in a week, and this is symbolic of those 7 days of creation, 6 days of creation, the seventh day of rest, which is the Sabbath. And now we are currently in the counting of 7 weeks, from Pesach to the giving of the Torah. We count a period of 7 weeks, which is 49 days, and then the 50th day is when we receive the Torah. And in this week's parsha, we talk about Shemitah, which is a 7-year period. So the 7th year, you let the land rest. You aren't supposed to work the land actively. You are allowed to eat the fruits, which are even holier because you're not working the land, and that is Shemitah. And then there's Yovel, which is the Jubilee year, which is 7 years of 7, and then the 50th year is the Jubilee, where all debts are erased and everything starts from scratch again. So we've got all these fractals of 7, and in this particular period where we're actively counting each day, where the mitzvah is to count, really brings some simplicity, because you can think like, what am I supposed to do after such a massive thing, like being taken out of Mitzrayim, like taken out of my suffering. And what we do is we count. Each day, you just count that day. And something so relieving about that, it's like, oh, I can do that. That's doable. Just count. Each week is also corresponding to the different sfirot. And so we've got 7 weeks. We've got 7 of the sfirot in the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. And then with each of those are the sfirot inside the sfirot. So there's all these like fractal experiences of each of the sfirot and the deeper refinement and reflection and healing that happens on each of these layers.